right, guys, we're going to continue our lesson on GDP. Our learning target is I can analyze how inflation impacts GDP calculation. So today we're just going to cover the very last part. That is the Consumer Price Index. Remember, last week we were talking about nominal GDP, GDP per capita, and growth GDP. Now we're just going to look at the Consumer Price Index. So it includes inflation. So when we think of inflation, remember, inflation is an overall increase in price levels that reduces people's purchasing power. So when wages increase or stay the same, but inflation increases more, people have less purchasing power. So if, for instance, I were to get a 2% raise this year just because I was doing a great job at my work, but the inflation for the year sat at 5%, do you really think that 2% raise that I got is going to make a difference? No, not really, right? Because the inflation rate is much higher than my raise rate. So even though I'm making more money because inflation is higher, I have less purchasing power. So inflation is often measured, or inflation is measured by price indexes such as the Consumer Price Index, which is what we're going to look at today. So the Consumer Price Index, or the CPI, compares one's goods or set of goods prices every year to see how inflation has grown. And like last week, the Consumer Price Index has a formula that you're going to need to know. So make sure that you have your form sheet that I gave you last week. So our Consumer Price Index is our current prices divided by our base price multiplied by 100. And as we progress through this will make a little more sense. So we're going to look at the price of towels, and we have 3 different years. And year 1 is our base year. So remember, our equation is current prices divided by base prices multiplied by 100. So if we're looking at year 1, which happens to be our base year, the price of towels for year 1 was $10. So that goes into our current price, but it also goes into our base price too, right? Because year 1 is our base. So 10 divided by 10 should give us 1, times 100 will give us a CPI of 100. Now, if our economy is doing really, really well and it's functioning as it should, our CPI should always be 100. When it is over this number, it means that our inflation is much higher than it should be. So if we were to look at year 2, the price of our towels is now $10.25. So our current price is $10.25. Our base price again is 10. So $10.25 divided by 10 will give us, let me pull up my calculator so I don't tell you wrong. So $10.25 divided by 10 will give you 1.025 times 100 gives you 102.5. Now year 3, we're up to $10.50. So $10.50 divided by 10, remember 10 is our base, will give you 1.05. If you times that by 100, you will get 105. So each year, due to inflation, our price increases just a little bit. It looks like it increases by 2.5. So let's practice together. Now we're going to look at the price of notebooks. Remember, year 1 is our base year. So if we were to look at year 1 in our formula, the current price of notebooks is 2. And our base, because we know that year 1 is our base, is 2. So 2 divided by 2 gives us 1 times 100. Our CPI here is 100, as it should be, right? Should be 100. So this is 100. Sorry, guys. So remember we had our 2, which is our current price, divided by our base price times 100, and it gave us our 100. All right, looking at year 2, our current price for year 2 is $2.50. So $2.50 is our current price. If we were to divide that by our base, which we know is 2, we would get, so $2.50 divided by 2 gets us 1.25 times 100 will give us 125, which is much higher than our CPI the year before. All right, year 3, now our current price is $4. So 4 divided by 2 will give you 2 times 100 will give you 200. Here, our price index jumps significantly from year to year. We go from 100 to 125 to 200. So as the years progress, our inflation just gets higher and higher. All right, next one, we're gonna do the same thing. So year 1 is our base again. So we have our current price of 35 divided by our base price of 35, which will give us 1 times 100 will give us 100. And we know that we want our CPI for our base to be 100 because that means our economy is healthy and it's not overly inflated. So now let's look at year 2. Our price jumps to 45. So now we have 45 divided by 35 will give us 1.28 times 100 times 100. And this will give us 128. You guys, I'm trying. 128.57. And the last one, we have year 3. So now we know our current price is 50 divided by 35 will give us 1.42 times 100. And we get 142.85. So like before, each year inflation gets a little bit higher, causing an increase in price. All right, guys. So now we're going to go back and we're going to practice some problems on GDP. So go ahead and get your formula sheet back out and get ready to go.